Thank you everyone for coming to the talk, like Road to 100% Test Coverage, Myth or Reality. The name of the talk, of course, is because, we speak a lot about testing, but not so many people believe, like for example, we at Very Good Ventures, we enforce for this 100%. So I'm gonna explain like what are the tricks that we tend to use, some strategies about that, and of course, we will start with like some technical part, more theory, but we will continue with like, at the end of the talk with a simple example that we can see. First, I would like to introduce myself. So my name is Óscar Martín. I'm from Madrid, Spain. Right now, I'm engineering manager at Very Good Ventures, but I'm also part of the community with the Flutter España. We have here another organizer, Jaime Blasco. And here together we organize some events in Spain, like Flutter meetups. First, I would like also to tell you what is going to be the agenda. So the first point, I would like to tackle like why is important the testing, because not so many people focus on the importance of it. So many people, they don't consider that is important. Also the architecture, that I will say for me is one of the key parts, so that's why it's so important, and I think it's the one that so many people struggle with testing. And the last thing, I would like to talk about some basic of testing. So on this talk, of course, there are more testing, like golden and integration tests, but for the sake of simplicity for this talk, we will not tackle. We will just be focused on the unit test with client and repositories. Don't worry for the ones that they are not familiar with this naming, because if you are not familiar with these principles of architecture, we will explain in a bit. And of course, at Very Good Ventures, we use Flutter block. So I will explain also a little bit like how we test our blocks. And the last thing that we will tackle is how to test the UI. That in this case, we will see like some scenarios that you can use the widget testing. As I said, like for example, golden test, we will not tackle in this talk about the UI test. Also, we will not tackle the integration test. Actually, I have a colleague yesterday that gave a talk about integration test, so you can watch it. If you didn't see it yesterday, you can watch it online. Great. So, of course, I call not just why the test, but also very good test. This is something not just because Very Good Ventures, but I'm gonna call it because so many people are focusing on testing, but they are just focusing on the metrics. We will see the 100%, but it's just a number. We need to be focused more on the quality of the test than on the quantity of the test. And of course, how the code coverage can help with that. So why is important? Again, architecture is key for everything. So most of the people, when they are starting on testing, they are really struggling with the architecture. Because it's not just because doing the test itself is complicated, it's because most of the time your application is not going to be ready, because you never thought about that. You never thought maybe about dependency injection. You never thought about, okay, so how this is going to affect my widget tree. This is something that some people, basically, especially when you are learning in Flutter, they don't care. It's just at the point that you are starting on testing that you verify your architecture and you make sure that it's correct in order for you to test. Actually, most of the complicated part that I face in my life testing is because to poor architecture decisions, because I took like an old code base that it was not prepared. Like for example, static methods. This is one of the common ones. I will say like to reach the 100% coverage is easy, but especially this last percent is going to be also about poor architecture decisions. Of course, as you are thinking on the architecture, you will think that your code is gonna be more robust. What I mean by that is like it's gonna be less bugs, but it doesn't mean that you are not gonna have bugs, because so many people think that, oh, I'm gonna have 100% coverage and I have 0 bugs. That is totally lie. Why? Because of course you are going to have less bugs and you are going to be concentrate on that. But for me, one of the key points on testing, and this is something that, for example, I try to do myself, is like every time that I have a bug, I always try to prepare a test scenario for that bug. So at least I ensure that it doesn't happen again. And of course, with the previous test, I'm going to focus that, or at least I'm going to make sure that all the previous scenarios are covered and I don't have any regression problem, for example. As well, easier to identify the logic. When I mean the logic of your application, it could be, for example, that you are starting a project. It has like a legacy code, and imagine that it has like 0% of coverage, and it's like a, I don't know, 40 screens application. We do this like many times at BGB, and one of them, the cool things for us that as we start always with the testing part, at least we make sure that, okay, so let's go screen by screen, let's go repository by repository, and we get the knowledge of the application by doing so. Of course, this is something that, especially in a big application, is going to be like really painful. And for us, it's also like a way to know like if the new code that we are creating is breaking something with the old code. And at the end, I don't know your goal, but at least my goal is always to get more confidence and sleep better. I think I never built more confidence about my code than working at BGB with the 100% coverage. Before, I always been in like so many consulting companies that they were basically don't taking care about any part of code coverage. Oh my God, we always have the feeling, okay, I will not deploy on Fridays, all these kind of jokes that we see on Twitter or whatever. I mean, for me, really, I really don't care. I really don't care when I'm gonna deploy, how I'm gonna deploy, because I have the confidence that it will not break. And if it is break, I will have at least the strategy with all the test scenarios that I prepare to make sure that I know more or less what is broken and how to fix it. So that's something that for me really relieved my, I don't know, my anxiety and everything, and it gives me more confidence. Okay, so code coverage. So code coverage, for the ones that you are not familiar, so first I would like to ask, like, how many of you have like previous experience with testing? Like, can you raise the hand? Okay, let the hand raise if you encourage 100% coverage in your applications. Okay, now the BGP people don't. Okay, so just a few. Okay, so for the ones that they don't know exactly like what is code coverage, so basically we are gonna exercise our application. So we are gonna have some test scenarios, and it's basically a metric that is in a percentage of which part of your application are covered by tests or not. So basically, yeah, it's the percentage. So in this case, 100 or even 0% could be. Again, and I will repeat that all the time, like it really needs to be very good testing. If it is, I don't care if I have 100% coverage and it's the worst testing on my life. Like for example, imagine you have a button. You have a button and you have a test scenario that is clicking that button. But you don't verify if it is doing a navigation, if it is doing a, I don't know, opening a dialogue, whatever. At the end, in terms of code coverage, just by the fact that you are clicking on the button, it's already covering that line. Okay, so then don't be focused, because I face like with so many developers in so many companies that they do kind of this trick. Like they just click the button, they just simulate that they click the button, and of course it's gonna be automatically covered. But that's not the point. That doesn't help to anything. But again, why 100% and not 80%? I think one of the first questions that I ever asked at BGB, so my first mentor for that, it was Felix Angelov, and I always ask, because before I have like zero experience with testing. So I was like, okay, why 100%? Like, why not, I don't know, 95, 97, whatever. And like, at the end, you start to make some decisions, like you need to do some choices about, okay, what are you going to be testing? Or in other case, what are you going to be missing? Because if you define the 95%, like, okay, should I test my UI? Should I test my repository? What happens if I am like 94%? At the end, it creates like an extra complexity that, in my opinion, is like really, really painful. So if you just abstract yourself of the number, because actually, I don't even run the coverage on like myself. I don't run the coverage most of the time in local. I let that to the CI, because I really don't care. I know that if I create I don't know, if I create one test, I don't need to wait for the CI. Okay, of course the CI will take care of that. this is a really simple example on how the coverage, or how we see the coverage in local. So of course, if you want to run it locally, so there is a let's say 2 commands or 3 commands that you can use. First, you can use very good CLI with a very good test, and you put some parameters. Of course, you can use with the normal Flutter test, but at least at BGB we use the very good CLI for it, and we collect the coverage. So that basically will get your application knows what is the coverage. After that, we use LCOV, so that is this report. I know it looks like really old, but to be honest, I mean, there are not like better libraries to display the code coverage these days, at least for Flutter and for Dart. And it's very simple. Like on the top right, you just see the percentage. So in this case, it's a really tiny application, as you can see, and it's 100%. Then you have all the directories. You have all the directories that your application is going to be there. And so yeah, architecture is key. Of course, this talk is not about architecture. I could be like 1 hour talking about architecture, but at least I want to give you like some insight on what is the approach that we follow. So actually, this image is from the block library. We also use it internally a lot as a reference to explain like what is the architecture that we follow. If you are not familiar with it, like no worries. So basically, it's like 3 layers architecture, with one of them a little bit more complex, split in 2. We will see it in details. But the first one is the data layer. So basically, the data layer is going to be, okay, from even local database, whatever all this data. Okay. Then the domain layer, that is what I mentioned before. So in the data layer, we will have what we call clients most of the time. And then in the domain layer, we have our repositories. So these repositories, for example, on this scenario, is like repository about weather. So weather information. So I'm gathering some information about the weather. Where? Okay, so in this case, for example, I'm getting the data from an API and from a local cache. And I will basically build an object that is going to be the weather that I'm going to pass to my application. So basically all the domain models on the app. Then we have what we call the application layer, and it's split in 2 parts. The business logic, as I mentioned before, we use Flutter block. So of course, in this case, it will be like whatever block. So the block itself doesn't care if you are getting the data from the API, from Firebase, or whatever. At the end, it's going to just call the repository, and that's it. And the presentation is all the widgets or all the UI that you can have in your application. It's really important that you cannot jump, let's say, for the layers. So basically, the application layer should not call never directly to the data layer. Okay. Again, so this is available on the block library. You can have the reference, but also we have like some blog articles or I strongly recommend you to take a look to that article. It's going to explain you all the layers in details. Great. So many of you, maybe if you are familiar with testing, you will know this couple of slides. But yeah, I just wanted to give an introduction for the ones that they don't have any basic knowledge at all. So the first thing that you will learn pretty much when you are creating a test is the group. So all your tests are going to be grouped by something, and you have several methods that is going to help you to set up everything. So in this case, we have setup and setup all, and we have also tear down and tear down all. The only difference is like all the setups are going to be executed before, and all the tear down are going to be executed right after. So the setup is going to be executed before each test is running. Is going to run, and the setup all is going to be just one before all tests run. So for example, if you have a group with 10 the tear down and tear down all is like really similar, but right after the test execute. Also, very like dummy scenario is like, how do we group? So basically, for example, for repositories and clients, we always try to group So first, the name of the class, then the name of the method that is on this repository, in this client, or even on the block itself, the name of the event. Why? Because at the end, when you are executing this on the CI, it's going to take all these groups and it's going to group all the details, and it's very important in order for you to follow the track. And also, if you never saw like how it looks like a test before, something like super dummy. So in this case, we are going to check that the dummy function is returning 1. We have the expect keyword. The expect keyword is the one that you are going to see the most. So basically, you are going to have the left, that is the test that is going to be executed, and you have the second part, that is the, let's say, the expected result. So in this case, is 1. Mocktail. I don't know if you ever heard about Mockito, but we have in Flutter also Mockito, but Felix create the library, also Felix Angelov create Mocktail. The only difference with Mockito is basically this Mocktail is not going to use any code generation. So everything is going to be without that. Like up to you, whatever, more or less the APIs are going to be like pretty similar. The only difference is going to be the code generation that we try to avoid as much as possible, especially for this kind of scenarios that, as we encourage for, of course we are going to have a lot of tests, so we don't generate. So if you never use it, it's like really simple, or if you even don't know exactly what is a mock class. So if you have the image in your head about like the layers, so for example, a repository is going to use a client. So in this case, in my repository, if I want to test my repository, I don't care about the client. Like I'm going to just mock the client. So for example, here we have like the mock class, and basically it's like really easy, simple as a mock class, extend mock, implement my class. Okay? The only thing that you need to verify, and that's why we are going to be using the when, is like every time that you are instantiating a class that is going to be mock, you need to make sure that all the methods or all the properties that you are going to be using has a value, has a default value, because by default are going to be null. So then it's going to tell you that, okay, you are using this and it has a default value to null. In this case, so for example, if we are using the dummy function, then we just need to do when my class.dummy function return 1. And also inside of Mocktail and Mockito, you have also the verify never. So whenever you need to know if a code has been executed or not, like if you are doing an API. We will see more in details. And the last thing for the basics are going to be the test widget. Very similar API to the unit test. The only difference is like here is test widgets, and you are going to, let's say, kind of simulate that your widgets are in the screen. So in this case, we have several methods, like for example, pump widget, pump and settle, pump. You will see all this later. Pump widget is, let's say, one of the basics because you need to put, you need to simulate that you are going to put the element in the screen. So for example, with pump widget, we simulate that sample widget is on the screen. You also can do with the tester tap. If you want to tap a button, and pump and settle is like, as I'm saying, like you are simulating. So it's not like you have like when you tap a button, you have the ripple effect. You have also when you release the button, it has, if there is a navigation at the end, there are some frames that you need to process. So in this case, pump and settle, you will process everything. You will just wait until all the animations has been complete, and with pump, you just execute one frame. So it really depends on the test scenario. You might need to use one or the other, but the most typical one is the pump and settle. So here, QR code. I mean, if you have a computer or whatever and you want to check the code, so it's a really simple application that I'm gonna show. But yeah, basically, just in case you want to follow. I'm not gonna dig a lot in details on like how it's implemented because it's not the purpose of the talk. So it's like a really simple app that is just fetching data from Rick and Morty. So if you are familiar, I mean, it's like a pretty similar, a pretty common API because it's free. You don't need any key or whatever. And yeah, basically we are just getting some data, some characters in this case, we display on the screen. as I said, like don't expect anything fancy from when you run the code, because the purpose of that is gonna be the testing part. But I'm gonna show you a little bit of the code. I'm going to show you also how it's structured, just in case you are looking for in the, at least at BGB, we try to, so first we have the client and the repositories. We always use, like we always put it on the packages folder, okay? That is also part of explained on the article that I mentioned before. And then I will start with the API, okay? But just at least for you have a reference on where to get this information. Great, so get characters. I will not go, if you are familiar with Flutter, I'm pretty sure you use already the HTTP client. It's just like a normal API and getting the data, and I'm returning the characters, okay? So nothing like super complicated. One important thing is like the dependency injection. So as you can see here, I'm receiving the client, okay? I do that because, as I said, so I am on the API. So for me, the one that I need to mock is going to be the client. So in this case, the HTTP. Okay. Great. So as you can see, the first thing that you will find is the client. So the client that is going to be mocked. We also need to mock the response because we are going to fetch the data, and we need to also fake the URL on the response there. Very similar to what we saw on the basic concepts, like we have the group, we have the setup all, we have the setup, and we also have another group with the name of the method. So yeah, as I have like 100% coverage, I have basically scenarios for everything. For the sake of time, I will not tackle all the scenarios, but we can see a couple of examples, okay? So for example, we have a scenario, and I want to verify that all the data that I'm returning is correct, or at least is more or less what I'm expecting. So the first thing I need to, let's see here. So it will be, let's say, this path. It will be that I'm returning the characters. So this is kind of the happy path. But if I see before I have a condition that if whatever happened on the server, like I have a status code different than 200, I'm going to throw an exception. Okay? So the first thing I need to mock is going to be response.status code. But also, if you follow, and here it's highlight, I'm going to be using also response body. So I have two clues here. I need to mock the status code, and I need to mock the body in order to go for the path that I really want. Else, I'm going to have this kind of error that a lot of beginners has, not even beginners, like even me, if I forget something, you will get like the return value is null because you need to mock, okay? So how to mock it? So I'm going to be using mocktail, and it's really simple. I just need to do when the response is status code, and I need to return a 200 in order to skip the first throw. The second thing is I just need to return like some valid response. Something pretty common that I do is like I just simply, this is simple like copy paste from the API, so you can do the response. And I usually put it like in my test scenario, so I don't need to worry about that. Of course, if the response on the server changes for whatever reason, we will have something to update in our test. Okay, and the last thing we do is like, okay, so the client is gonna do the get, so I need to return the response. One of the keywords that we saw before is the expect. So again, like the first part is the method that I'm going to be executing, and the second part is the expected result. So in this case, I'm executing the API characters, okay? So the API, I initialize it here, and as I said, so I'm going to be using the real API, but I'm not going to be using the real HTTP client. That is the one that is mocked. So I'm not going to be doing, in this case, like a regular call. I'm not going to call the server or anything, okay? And so yeah, so basically, and Then we have another keyword that, so we have a matcher that is called the completion. It's like really useful when you are doing async calls, okay? So what is gonna happen? So basically, I'm gonna call the get characters, the completion is gonna tell me that it's a future, so I need to wait for it, and this is the result. So in this case, I just verify that the list of characters is correct. Of course, I can go even in details. I can even verify, like, for example, name, status. I can even verify like each of the data. But in this case, I didn't make it for simplicity, but we usually do it. Like, it really depends on how you trust your API. So it really depends, like, for example, if your API is something that is out of your control, I will encourage you to go a little bit deeper on that. At least you verify all the cases. And then I'm gonna show you, like, for example, these test scenarios. So as you can see, everything is about scenarios. I mean, everything is covered by lines, by all the code coverage. So here, the only difference is like my status code. So at the point that it's gonna be different to 200, something is gonna fail. So as you can see here, I don't even care about the body. Like, I don't even need to mock the body because it's not gonna even arrive. It's not gonna be even on that point. So I just put whatever number different to 200. This line is exactly the same, so I just return the response, with the only difference that we have another matcher, pretty useful, that is whenever you are throwing an exception. So it's the throw a, and you just verify that is an exception. Okay, in this case, it's the response that I mentioned before. Okay, so as I said, like, you can verify even if your JSON is invalid. So I will pass a JSON that is not correct. On this case, with that, I mean, you can have like many cases, even if empty, whatever the scenario you have. Okay. Now, let's move to the repository. So in this scenario, like, the repository is like really dummy because it's just passing data from one place to the other. And like in real case scenarios, of course, it's not as simple as that. As I mentioned before, you can have even a local database. You can even, I don't know, get from different APIs, whatever you have in your application. Here is like really simple. So I just have the Rick and Morty. And again, something important, the dependency injection. So on the repository, I'm gonna mock the API. Okay? I'm gonna close this. And here is gonna be even simple. So as I said, so I have my Rick and Morty API that is gonna be mock. So I just pass the Rick and Morty API. I just pass it to the repository. So let's go also to the happy path that is returning characters on success. So pretty similar scenario. So when Rick and Morty get characters, so when I'm executing this line of code, so this one, I'm gonna return the value. In this case, it's a little bit different because it's with the then answer that is used for whenever you have like an async operation. So here we just return like a dummy data that I have here. And this is like a character that I have on me with my models. Okay, and then the spec is something similar. I have the completion, and I'm verifying that I have exactly the same data that in the API. Then let's go to another funny part that is going to be the block. So are you familiar with block? Like, anyone not familiar here with block? Okay, I'm surprised about that, but no worries. I will try to explain as much as possible about block in 2 minutes. But so yeah, basically block. What is block? So you are going to receive an event and you are going to emit an state. So it's like an state machine in computer science. So how do we do it? So as I said, we just receive an event. So in this case, it's called character fetch request, and we emit some states. So in this case, I'm emitting always a loading. I'm calling my repository, and then if everything is success, I'm just emitting the success with the characters. If not, I just catch and I emit the error. Okay, something super simple. And again, this is something that you are going to see in all the layers. Like I'm injecting the character repository that I will have it appear in my widget tree in order to be able to mock the character repository. So let's go to the test part of it because it's a little bit more different. Here I'm going to be using the block test that is also created by Felix. So that's one of the reasons because we mainly use, because a lot of state management solutions you are not going to be able even to test it, or at least it's like ultra complicated. Here it's like super easy. You will see it. The only difference is a little bit, the syntax is a little bit different. So you have a setup, so the name is kind of the same. You have the build, act, and expect. I'm going to show you. So on the setup, you are going to define what are the preconditions that you need for that scenario to happen. So at the end, it's like you are checking for the mock part. So in this case, so I'm going to verify that if getCharacters it's throwing an exception, something will happen. So this is what I'm going to do. So the build, you will see that it's always the same. Important note that don't forget about the build method here, about the characters block, because so many people create like just one instance of the block and they use it for the whole test. That's bad practice. You can read about that on the block library. Felix explained it like pretty well, because you can have like mixed conditions and it could be quite fun to debug. So take care of that. The act is just the event that you are going to be calling, and the expect is that, so I'm expecting a loading and I'm expecting a failure. On this case, the loading is, it's like that because by default is loading. Similar case to the success. So on the success, setup is pretty similar. So I'm just getCharacters, and now, I'm returning the characters. I'm not throwing an exception. The build is the same, the act is the same, and even the expect, the first step is the same. The only difference is the second state that you are going to be emitting is the success with the characters. Okay? And now let's jump to one of the most scary part for the developers, because a lot of people say like, yeah, you have the code coverage, but not just on you don't have the UI, because the UI is complicated to test. Yeah, it's a little bit more tricky, but I will repeat, if you have the correct architecture, if you have the correct setup, it should not be that complicated. So I have my characters page that, as I said before, so we are going to get some data from the server and we are going to display it on the screen. If you see wherever the repository of BGB, you are going to see this practice that we always, we call it page view. I don't know if there is like a better name for that, but internally we call it page view. So basically, we split all our big layouts in two parts. So the first one is going to be the page, that is going to be the one responsible on getting, let's say, the dependencies for that page. So if I have a blog, if I have a repository, whatever I need, it's going to be set up here. Why? Because that way, in characters view, here I don't initialize anything. So everything is going to be already instantiated like on like upper on the tree. And on my test, I can inject. If I have a block, I can inject the block. So I basically, if we have everything on the same place, like everything, the setup and everything, it will be like completely impossible. Maybe not totally impossible, but it will be like super tricky to manage all the test scenarios for your view. So here, really simple, I'm creating the characters block. I have my character repository already, so I'm using context.read, like the same for provider. I'm not using any other library, and I'm just displaying my characters view. And the important part here is going to be the characters view. That is just a switch case with all the scenarios, with the failure, the loading, the success. And these are the ones that I'm going to be testing. So at the end, for me, everything is split by different layers. So in this case, we have 3. So I just need to test 3 scenarios. So if I'm going, the first group is the characters page. I don't care about the content on the view. I just care that, okay, my view has been displayed correctly, and that's it. So that's why it's as simple as the characters page will be responsible for the block, and it will display, it's going to verify. So here we have the find one widget. If you are not familiar with it, basically it's going to check that in your screen there is one type of widget that is called character view. And I'm finding it because find by type. I could find by key, I could find by text, but one of the key things is with the type. Then the characters view, that is one of the important things, and it's going to be the last one. So for example, I'm going to display a loading indicator. So I don't care what is the loading indicator. I will have whatever representation here on the character loading view. So here I have a circular progress indicator, but it's not the purpose for me to know what is inside. Like, I just care that this widget is on the screen. Very similar to like all the mocktail part is like exactly the same as always. Like character block dot state, and I'm going to return the state. So in this case, it's the default one with the loading. And then I have here is something similar that is not the pump widget, but is the pump up. This is an extension that we traditionally use every day, and it's just a way to avoid to put this on every UI method, because you don't need to put the material app, the localization delegate, and everything. So at least you don't need to repeat yourself on that setup. And again, you just verify that there is a loading view with a find widget. If it is failure, okay, so I just emit the failure, and I verify that the characters error view is there. So here also, as you can see, I'm injecting the block. As simple as that. I don't need to do any other setup for that. So that's all for the code. As I said before, you have here also the repository. This QR code is for my Twitter. If you have some question about testing or whatever, feel free to reach out to me. You have also the link of the repository.